This morning, we have a culture war hat trick. We got social media censorship, political bias from a social media company, and we have information about a famous socialist who, as it turns out, comes from an extremely wealthy family. Why, yes, none other than Carlos Maza, the man who triggered a massive YouTube adpocalypse because he was angry that late night host Steven Crowder said naughty words about him on YouTube. This resulted in tons of channels getting purged. Well, the other day, John Levine of the New York Post published a story exposing Maza as coming from an extremely wealthy family, having multiple homes, basically being a socialist with a silver spoon. Now, of course, people like Maza say, but I should use my privilege to fight for the working class. I love how these rich people who end up becoming socialists think the solution to help the working class is to take away the right of them to freely trade their labor. Yes, because under a socialist system, those poor working class people would literally not be allowed to determine how their labor is distributed. So here's what happens next. John Levine actually gets suspended from Twitter for posting images of one of the homes of Carlos Maza's family. Now you may say, Tim, that is completely warranted. John Levine published photos of a man's private home. You can't do that. Okay, well, I will say this is censorship and I will show you the bias. You know why? I might actually take that claim seriously, that you shouldn't post photos of someone's home, if Carlos Maza got suspended for doing the same thing last month. Why, yes, Carlos Maza published images of James Carville's home, and no one cared. He accused Carville of being a grifter for wearing regular clothes. Well, let me tell you what a grifter really is. A grifter is someone like Carlos Maza who grew up with extreme wealth, never knew hardship, and tries claiming in his response to this that I too have known what it's like to struggle to make ends meet. Now, in the same statement, he's like, my family pays my rent. He lives in New York. His family pays his rent. Now hold on a second. See, here's the thing. I don't care if you're rich and you want to advocate for socialism or any of these things. There's two issues here. For one, I find it interesting that people like Maza so often have to defend this issue. Why? A lot of people rush to his defense saying, you can be rich and do this. Why would Maza at all feel uncomfortable being exposed as a super wealthy individual, as being, dare I say, the 1%? Because it is hypocritical to not tell that to people in the first place, to withhold that information and keep it private. Well, to an extent, it is difficult, and I do think it's okay for someone to be rich and do this. But it does seem hypocritical to me that he would not be like, by the way, guys, you know, I grew up in it's only when he gets exposed does he try making an excuse for it. Not just come out and say you're rich. So what, man? You know, I think the issue is that he wanted to have this air of being a downtrodden working class hero. And now that he's exposed, he's just another rich guy. But the bigger problem I have with this, and it's not the Patreon stuff. It's this idea that you, as this wealthy individual who has never known struggle, never. Now he'll claim he did. No, please. Let me know when you're sleeping on a park bench and you're trying to figure out if you should buy the Band-Aid for your split thumb or the cheeseburger because you haven't eaten in a day. You want to talk about struggle. This guy's never experienced that, but he's going to claim to fight on your behalf, and his solution is to take away your right to freely trade your labor. That's socialism. All right. So I think these people are hypocrites, but let's get into the story. I want to first read to you about the life of luxury Carlos Maza lived, and I'm going to call him out as a hypocrite and completely out of touch, ivory tower, silver spoon elite who has no idea what he's talking about. And I love it. You know why? There was that Hidden Tribes report where they said that the progressive left tends to be upper class, college educated with over $100,000 per year salary. Wonder why that is. Because they don't know what it's like to actually have to struggle. And so they think if the government just does everything, everything will be okay. Let's read the story. And then we'll talk about John Levine getting suspended. And I'll do this too. Give a shout out to John. His Twitter handle is @LevineJonathan, LevineJonathan. I'm giving him a shout out because he got suspended over this. And there are very few journalists who are willing to call out the shenanigans. I know New York Post is pretty conservative, but I guess if you're gonna get hit by this, I'll shout you out. Levine writes, Carlos Maza doesn't like rich people. The social media socialist with more than 150,000 followers on Twitter and YouTube combined regularly uses his platforms to rail against the wealthy and powerful and urges his fans to be skeptical of their opinions. Quote, just found out James Carville, who spends his time lecturing Democrats for being too far left, lives in an absolutely obscene 4-story mansion. Maza said in one such example from February, blasting the longtime Democratic strategist and posting a photo of Carville's home to his Twitter account. Dear God, can we stop taking political advice from the ultra wealthy, he bemoaned. You really have to respect this guy's grift, constantly dressing in normal clothes on TV to feign relatability while living in this masterful con artist. Wow, I couldn't have said it better myself, Carlos. You just described yourself. With your massive Boca Raton family mansions, multiple properties and condos on the Upper West Side of New York. Now I get it. It's your family. But that family is still a part of you. They pay your rent. Can we please stop taking political advice from the ultra wealthy, to quote Carlos Maza? Take a look at this. Wearing normal clothes to feign relatability. Literally what Maza does. Because he should have added a caveat. Mind you, I am rich too, but I'm calling them out. Oh, please spare us. Carlos didn't want anyone to know this. He is upset he's being exposed because he's a hypocrite. Just last month, he called out James Carville for living in an obscene 4-story mansion. I love it. I'm pretty sure his family has more properties than Carville. Well, I could be wrong. Whatever. The point is, he's rich. We should treat gay people the same way we treat straight people, eating them when they get too rich, he said in another post. Like any good online socialist, Maza raises money for his internet presence through a Patreon account, where comrades, a word Carlos uses to describe his supporters, can fund him in increments of $2, $5, and $10 a month. But if Maza wants to start eating the rich, he may have to begin with his own family. Now, first of all, I see no issue with Maza raising money on Patreon at all, even if he is rich. When I look at how the internet operates, I think back to when Radiohead, I think it was Radiohead, did the pay what you will model for one of their albums. This was a long time ago. Maza could absolutely say it's $10 a month to get access to all my content. Or he can say, I'll give it to you for free. Please contribute so I can keep working. I actually think it's a good model. So I have absolutely no problem with that. You can look at a ton of high profile creators who have pretty, successful careers and make a ton of money and have a Patreon or a PayPal, myself included. My YouTubes do really well. And I have a Patreon for people, or I'm sorry, I don't have a Patreon. I hate Patreon. But you can look to literally everybody. I think it would be hypocritical to call out Maza for doing that. It's not hypocritical to call him out for claiming we shouldn't take advice from the rich when he literally produces political commentary and he's rich. He's lying. Carlos Maza is a grifter by their own definition. By their own definition, that would make him a con artist. Telling you the rich are bad, don't take their advice, but not telling you he's one of them. It's a paradox. Now, here's where it gets funny. He posted these images of James Carville's home, and apparently that's okay. John Levine did the same thing and he got suspended. Welcome to the political bias that exists on social media. Just another grain of sand in the heap, proving that it is real, that Carlos Maza can post images of someone he doesn't like, of his home. But when John Levine does it, he gets suspended. Isn't it funny how that works? When you expose the con artist grifters on the left, well, you're out. He says, you really have to respect this guy's grift. Oh, I really respect your grift too, Carlos. Constantly dressing in normal clothes on TV to feign relatability while living like this masterful con artist. Wait till you see the pictures of Carlos's house. Through his clan, the millennial firebrand is connected to multiple Florida mega mansions, a $7.1 million pad on the Upper West Side purchased under an LLC, and a yacht by luxury maker boat Donzi. Maza's mother, Vivian Maza, was one of the first employees at Ultimate Software, a Florida-based behemoth which now employs more than 5,000 people. Starting in 1990 as an office manager, she ultimately rose to become the group's chief people officer in 2004. In addition to her day job, Vivian Maza also developed a very close personal relationship with company founder Scott Scher. So close that an independent assessment of the company in 2016 cited the relationship as a corporate governance concern. The report said that they believed the pair to be more than just coworkers and have a familial relationship. The two later became engaged, and the couple has lived together for years, with Scher being a de facto stepfather to Carlos. Now, I have no problem with that. If you're rich and successful and you start a great company, bravo, Mr. Scher, I tremendous respect. But Carlos Maza should absolutely disclose this. And the reason he didn't, at least in my opinion, is because of the things he says about James Carville, for instance. Look at him. He's rich. Don't listen to him. Because if Carlos Maza was actually honest about his wealth, he comes off like a complete hypocrite. Public records show Vivian, Scott, Carlos, and sister Isabel all registered to vote at a 5-bedroom, 8-bathroom waterfront palace in Boca Raton. The property sold in Boca Raton? The property sold in 2018 for $10.8 million, according to Zillow. Cher also unloaded a 4-bed, 4-bath home in 2015 mansion in Weston, Florida. Now, again, it is important to clarify. This is his stepdad. It's not Carlos Maza's money personally, but he does benefit from it. And Maza admits that he benefits from it. His family is extremely wealthy. He registered to vote in this massive mansion worth nearly $11 million. So I understand, because I know a lot of people who are wealthy, and I understand when their parents are the ones with the money, they have access to privilege, but they themselves don't have a lot of money to spend, right? So I've known people who have lived in massive New York condos and skyscrapers because their parents are rich and their parents don't really give them money. I'm not going to pretend like Carlos Maza is getting a fat paycheck every month, like, he's literally getting millions of dollars. But it is important to point out, this is where he registered to vote, which should be his primary residence, at least back then. Stands to reason that Carlos Maza lived for a period in a massive multi-million-dollar mansion. Let me tell you about privilege. Because you want to talk about struggling to make ends meet, Carlos? Let's talk about the people who never had the option to have their family pay their rent or to live in a fancy mansion. And I'm also going to criticize your family for paying your rent because I think it is bad for a person to grow up being handed things, period. So there are some people I know, like I said, who are rich. Their parents don't give them money. Good. They shouldn't. You got to earn your keep. Well, let's read on. So they also say that Vivian currently resides in a $4.4 million 2-bed, 3-bath luxury condo in Fort Lauderdale, which she lists as her primary residence. The same LLC, which owns it, purchased a $7 million condo on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Look at these photos. While serving as the CEO of Ultimate Software, Cher was one of the most handsomely compensated CEOs in the country. In 2015, he took home $38.3 million. I got no beef with Cher. Sounds like he's done an amazing job, has an amazing company, had the privilege, the luck to meet someone that he actually loved through his company and married him. And I have tremendous respect for that. I also don't take big issue with him wanting to provide for those in his peripheral, his family, including his new stepkids. The issue I take is the hypocrisy, the privilege, the benefit, and the deceit. Carlos Maza isn't being honest about his position, and I wonder if his family knew about this. You don't call out James Carville for being rich while you yourself benefit from all of this. Now, some might say, yes, but he's using his privilege to speak up. No, he's not. If he was, he would have that as part of his identity, that he is a wealthy person doing it. He hid this fact, didn't want anyone to know, and only begrudgingly admitted it before this story came out. He actually said, I have to address this before the smear hits. That's right, because he knows it will look bad. And it does because he's not honest about it. There are tons of rich people who advocate for socialism, and everyone knows they're rich and they talk about it. That's fine. But for him to then, go after people like Carville shows he's a hypocrite. They say it's not clear how much Vivian and Cher actively support Maza's lifestyle, but evidence suggests the family has been happy to pitch in to help spread his socialist message. Both Cher and Vivian Maza are listed as comrades at the end of Carlos's most recent YouTube video. And the younger Maza himself admitted in an interview with Mel magazine that his family was there to financially back him if he needed it. Viv and Scott have also pitched in on the rent for Carlos's chic East Village pad just across from Tompkins Square Park. Friends tell the Post, rents for 1-bedrooms like Carlos's cost upward of $3,000 a month. I think a lot of these people are unhappy. I'm sure this guy is just craving some attention, James Carville told the Post. I don't have $1 billion, but whatever. But whatever I have, my daddy didn't give me. I think I inherited like $11,000. Maza did not respond to multiple inquiries from the Post, but in a statement posted on Twitter in advance of publication, the socialist fessed up to the silver spoons. Now here's the thing. I want to make sure I stress, John Levine got suspended over this. Carlos Maza posted photos of Carville's house. No issues. John Levine posted publicly available photos, and he got suspended for it. Double standard and censorship. Well, Carlos Maza on Twitter issued a statement saying, it looks like there's going to be an article about my family in New York Post, so I figured I'd get out ahead of it. There's a couple things I want to address because I don't really want to read everything he has to say about this. Okay, it also looks like I can't make this smaller, so it is what it is. He says this, my mom and her fiance are very wealthy thanks to a software company they started together when I was a kid. As a result, I've gotten to live a life of tremendous privilege. I got to go to college without debt and take low-paying internships when I graduated without worrying about rent or health insurance. His health care and his rent were paid for. But he then goes on to say that he understands what it's like to struggle to make ends meet. He says, I know what it's like to enjoy incredible wealth, and I know what it's like to struggle to make ends meet. No, you don't. You're a liar. That's a lie. You're lying. You want to know what it's like to struggle to make ends meet? It's sitting in your apartment wondering whether or not you should pay rent this month or you should pay for food because you haven't eaten in a long time, right? Maybe you haven't eaten in a day or two and you're like, I got a couple $100 to give the landlord, gotta eat. Or it's whether or not you pay your electric bill, or it's whether or not you even have a place to sleep. Struggling to make ends meet is something you have never experienced. Okay, maybe that's unfair. Maybe he has. I just really, really doubt it. He says, I've spent my professional life trying to use that privilege to advocate for a better world. That includes advocating for economic justice, and specifically an economic system that would shift power away from the ultra-wealthy and back to the working class. Now, he's either really dumb or he's lying, because socialist systems are command economies. That means that you centralize power immediately within a small group of people. Carlos Maza is not advocating for shifting power from the ultra-wealthy to the poor. He's advocating for a system where the ultra-wealthy will become an elite ruling class that can't have their wealth challenged by a system that allows upward mobility. In every single instance that we have seen of socialism or communism, there will always be a command authority reaping all of the benefits and maintaining that wealth by force. As it stands right now, the ultra-wealthy are subject to rules and regulations. I certainly think we can tax rich people more. I certainly think regulations work. I certainly think wealth disparity is a serious problem because it creates resentment and anger. But I do not believe the answer would be to rapidly monopolize the entire system so the people who are already ultra-wealthy party members, like the Democratic Party, will now never be able to be challenged. In the current system, you can freely choose to trade your labor as you see fit. And that provides for upward mobility, meaning you can be a homeless high school dropout from the south side of Chicago and then become successful and have a decently sized YouTube channel and make a good living, like me. That's why I do not like these socialists. They would prefer people like me stay in the gutter while they stay in their massive multi-dollar mansions. Oh, of course, they'll say, but we'll give you health care. No, I don't care. I prefer freedom over security always. And they would prefer to strip you of your freedom and lock you down in a system where they will always be on top and can never be removed. He says, I am aware that I am advocating for a system that would shift power away from members of my family. Lie. It would not. People like him become the party elites and they maintain all that power. Now, of course, as we know, when it comes to these grand revolutions, it is people like Carlos Maza who are the first, to go because they're the ones who foment the revolution. That's a fact. When it comes to I'm not going to call out any specific historical event, but the biggest threat to the revolution are those that started it in the first place. So you'll see things like, Robespierre kind of go nuts and take out all the moderates. So actually, I'm going to do this. I don't really care too much. He says, nobody is bankrolling my YouTube channel. I was able to go independent because I knew that if disaster struck, if nobody was interested in what I was creating, that I'd have a safety net, that I could count on my family to make sure I wasn't out on the street. I understand that is a rare privilege. I work my butt off to create videos that feel valuable enough to be funded by the people who support me on Patreon. And while I didn't ask for it, I'm grateful for my mom's monthly $10 donation. Well, John Levine over at the Post mentions that your stepdad is also a contributor. How much does he give you? You carefully excluded that from your statement. He says, I dread having to talk about this, not because I'm ashamed of my family or background, but because I am the least interesting part of my work. I've never wanted my videos to be about me. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Here's my favorite thing that Carlos Maza said. They published a home address too. Unbelievable. F the New York Post and every ghoul who works there. Let me just say that again. I love it. He said, they published a home address. A home address. Not my home address. A. You know what that means? It means he's got more than one. I love it. The ultra-wealthy hypocrites who tell you to give up your right to freely trade your labor as you see fit, to eat Twinkies all day if you want, and then have to pay for the healthcare for it. It's these people who say, let the party be in charge of what you can say, do, and eat. Like Mike Bloomberg, people like that. The ultra wealthy elites think they're smarter than you, and they should get to dictate what you can and can't do in terms of your labor. So what I can't stand about socialists is that they trick poor people into thinking that under this system, the glorious resources of the rich will trickle down to them. It will not, because it's all about labor. And guess what? Here's something I love with all the news about the health concerns happening around the world. I probably ought to get demonetized for saying that. There was one, I was reading, someone tweeted about how in this European country, I forgot which one, everyone can take time off and the system will cover the costs of, the health, issues. What I find funny is if every single person in the United States had to take off work because of a quarantine, there is no money. It's the people who make the money and then give it to the government pool, which is then used to pay for people who need to go to the hospital. So if everyone stopped working, there's no money to pay for healthcare. It just doesn't work that way. In reality, a socialist system means after you get home from your hard day's work, you have nothing in your hands. All you can do is get on your knees and beg the party elites, the ultra wealthy who have seized the system, and say, please, can I have a loaf of bread? I worked very hard today. And they're going to look you in the face and say, 1 bread per person, per family. You got your bread, move along. And you'll go wait in a bread line for that 1 loaf. In our capitalist system, where capitalism truly means the right to freely trade your labor as you see fit, you get home from work, you got your paycheck in your hand, and you say, today, I think I'm going to buy a dozen beautiful roses. I know it's not exactly what my family needs, but it is our right to do as we see fit to trade freely amongst each other. Well, you do have some people, and I really, really love, I guess it's not, I don't know where it is, that someone posted that meme where it's like the peasant with the sticks on his back saying, I think we should improve society, and a guy going, yet you participate in society. Haha, I'm so smart. These people are not very smart at all, and that's why they vote for people like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders in 2016, very different from Bernie Sanders today, mind you, because I was very much in support of a lot of things Bernie was talking about. He was more rational back then. But it's also fair to say that I was probably wrong on a lot of these issues too. And with Bernie Sanders' proposals today, like the wealth tax, never even thought about it. How does the economics work out? He doesn't know. In fact, Bernie doesn't even know how much it's going to cost to implement all of these radical programs. They just seem to think magical things exist. They don't realize that humans make stuff. And if humans stop making stuff, there's no stuff to use. They don't get it. Another person in his Twitter thread says, I too came from great privilege, and that's why I advocate for this system. Yeah, that's called guilt. That's called you do not relate to regular people. You do not know how they think, how they feel, and you are pandering to people who are greedy and jealous. And that's what you are. Chaotic, destructive forces, parasitic entities that think you, with all of your vast wealth, with no real world experience, know better than the rest of us and want to take away our right to freely choose. So you know what? I will say this. I have done very, very well for myself. Coming from humble beginnings as a mixed race high school dropout from the south side of Chicago who's experienced various periods of homelessness. And I worked hard. And I fought hard and I struggled and I figured it out and I've done very well for myself. And I've been living a pretty good life for the past couple years. So no, I will not bend a knee to your entire life of privilege where you've probably never done a day of hard labor in your life to tell me what I should be allowed to do. This system, while far from perfect, allows people like me and other poor people to fight and strive and gain that upward mobility. I will never bend a knee to your system of hierarchical party control where everyone must bend the knee to the system and have no opportunity for improving their lives. Because I've seen how those systems play out. We all have. We know what happens when people like you, who grew up knowing nothing but wealth, who's never done a hard day of labor in their life, gain control, and then don't seem to understand it's the farmers who knew how to farm. It's what we see time and time again. They take the farms away from the landlords because you shouldn't be able to own land and give it to the people. Turns out the people don't know how to farm and then everyone runs out of food. That system doesn't make sense. Now, I'm a pretty lefty individual. I actually think we do have problems with wealth disparity. The solutions they propose are not the answers. What we need to do is increase the bottom tier. We reduce poverty by creating opportunity, creating jobs, and helping people rise up and produce and be better, be smarter. No, that doesn't mean trickle-down economics. I'm not one of those guys. It means that we need to figure out how to improve our system and instill in our young people the ability to work hard and persevere so that they can succeed too. It's people like him who doesn't know what hard work is, who is confused by how the system works. He is the kind of person who grows up knowing nothing but privilege and not realizing there are people who worked hard to have what they have. So it's no surprise that it's the second generation of wealth that tend to be these socialist weirdos. Everything has always been handed to them. And they say things like, have the maid do it. Doesn't that, you've heard that before, right? Have the maid do it. That's how they see the world. When they look at someone who's got no health care, they say, we'll have the government give it to you. Not realizing the government, the money, is a portion of the resources of the entirety of our society. It is poor people, middle class people, and upper class people who are giving a portion of their labor to a system to then try and figure out ways to fix potholes, to give you a metaphor. But people like Maza are the let the maid do it of political commentary. They don't understand the hardship, the struggle, and the lack of resources that exists. They don't understand that you can't just snap your fingers and give everyone health care. It doesn't make sense. Resources are finite. Things must be built. Humans must do labor. But when you live your entire life in a world where literally everything around you is free, you can only assume that it should be free for everyone. It reminds me of that movie Elysium. You ever see it? Basically, up in space, there's a space colony, kind of. It's like a big ring. And all the rich people live there. And they have a device that can just cure all of their ailments. Literally anything, cancer, whatever. And the plot of the movie is basically, for no reason, they just won't give it to the poor people. It makes no sense. That's not how things actually work. The reason why we don't give everyone healthcare is because healthcare requires human labor, and we cannot take that by force. But people like Carlos Maza think we should. People like Bernie Sanders think we should. They say healthcare is a human right. Let me tell you something. Here's what I want you to do. I'm saying this metaphorically. Don't actually do this. I'll put it this way. If you were in the middle of the woods, buck naked, boom, there you are. Welcome to the real world. You have nothing. You have no one. Let's talk about what rights you have. You can say whatever you want. You can craft a weapon to protect yourself. You can build a home. You can walk around and say and do just about anything. But then you fall down and you break your ankle. Tell me about your right to healthcare now. You have a right to pursue healthcare. You can scream for help. But is there anyone around you to give you your human right to healthcare? The answer is no. And if a doctor happened to walk past you and your ankle was broken and you said, it is my right that you come here and help me, guess what they'll say? No, because they don't have to. You have no right to that individual's time and energy. Now, out of the goodness of their heart, because humans tend to be empathetic, he'd probably say, let me help you fix your ankle to the best of my abilities and we'll help get you out of here. Why? Because people tend to do right by each other. Not always. But I do think it's a tendency. But you cannot force them to do it. When you want to talk about what you truly have access to as a right, when you're in the middle of nowhere with no other humans around you, you must do the labor. If you're thirsty, you must find the water. If you're hungry, you must find the food. But feel free to say whatever you want. Go stand in the middle of the woods and yell about healthcare as a human right with 2 broken legs and see how long it takes for someone to actually come and fix your legs. There's not going to be any magical force. There will be no physical entity that just appears in front of you and says, now I will fix your legs because this is a right you have. It's not how things work. I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment will be coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel, and I will see you all then.